As I was scrolling through social media posts recently, which admittedly is not my favorite pastime, I feel like most of the platforms have become even more of a dumpster fire than they have been in the past. I noticed a theme, whether it's people on the left or the right. Basically, the post goes something like this. If you don't agree with me, you are a total moron. How could you possibly be so stupid? If you have arrived at a different understanding of the same situation, you must have 5 brain cells, and clearly you live under a rock. It got me starting to think, how did we get to this point where people who have divergent views of reality, have differing opinions on the same situations, can't sit back and say, yeah, I guess I can see how you arrived at that conclusion, but I disagree with you. Instead, they're just like, how are you such an idiot? Unfriend, bye-bye, I have no time for you. You are clearly a total miscreant waste of life. I'm sure the social media platforms themselves and the way we communicate on them has a large role in that. But since I do media analysis here, I'm going to talk about mainstream media and how maximizing and minimizing reality plays out and essentially turns us all into bots. Now, something that many of you may not know about me is that I actually went to seminary. I left cable news. I was a producer for a national cable news show, Fox and Friends, on Fox News Channel. When I was straight out of college, I left news and went to seminary. I got a Master of Divinity degree in psychology and counseling because I thought I wanted to be a therapist. It was my preaching professor whose first lecture got me thinking about going back to news as a reporter, which is eventually what I did, spent 12 years in the news business, and now here I am on YouTube after quitting my TV news career. One of the things we learned in my psychology classes was about how people maximize or minimize reality, and this is kind of a dysfunctional tool. Often, like if you're doing couples counseling, for instance, it's something that really causes rifts between people, because if you say, you always forget to take the trash out, or you never help me with the dishes, or you're always disrespectful, or you're never kind to me, you're usually oversimplifying reality. It's very hard to get two people to come to some kind of agreement to move forward with each other if they continue to refuse to see the nuances of their situation. Now, unfortunately, this happens a lot in the news business nowadays, as different news outlets have stopped necessarily looking for stories that are important or true or necessary for the public to hear about, and instead have started combing through headlines that they think their particular audiences will like. So instead of let me tell you what's going on, it's let me tell you what you want to hear. Unfortunately, that just drives us more and more into sort of these polarized parties, understanding situations that are totally different depending on who you watch. I'm going to make my point with clips from Rachel Maddow and Sean Hannity talking about Seattle, which is a topic I know a lot about because I used to live in Seattle and I was a reporter in Seattle. So I wanted to choose a topic that I know a lot about so that I can fish through the BS on both sides. Some of you may say Rachel Maddow and Sean Hannity are personalities. They're not journalists, so what's the big deal? I would say, though you may be correct on their presenting themselves that way, though I would question whether that's entirely the case, I do think there are a lot of people who look to them as people who are really giving it to them straight, are cutting through the spin and telling you what it's really like behind the scenes. And frankly, Rachel Maddow is going to say that in one of the clips that I'm going to show you.
As we've said over the course of this coverage, we will interject when we feel like there's something that's important and deliberate and very wrong that should be corrected, just so that we feel responsible about our broadcast.
All right, so you heard it for yourself. She's going to cut through the spin and tell you what's really going on so she can feel comfortable about her broadcast, which she says with a very smug smile. Now, the next clip I'm going to play is Mayor Jenny Durkan of Seattle on the phone with Rachel Maddow, talking in response to the governor of South Dakota's criticisms of Democratic-run cities across America during the RNC. So here's Jenny Durkan.
And her caricature of the great cities across America is not only wrong, it's purposefully wrong. I think she needs to get off Twitter and get off Fox News and come see our city. Seattle is It is a city that I raised my 2 children in, and I would not have raised them anywhere else.
Mayor Durkin fails to mention the CHAZCHOP, which was basically a takeover of multiple blocks of Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood when the Seattle Police Department essentially abandoned the East Precinct. And in that area, there were multiple people shot, some killed. People had a hard time getting to their residences. It had blocked emergency medical personnel from getting in. You'll even hear the former Seattle police chief talking about how difficult it was for them to respond to calls. I'll play that right now.
Our calls for service have more than tripled. These are responses to emergency calls. Rapes, robberies, and all sorts of violent accidents have been occurring in the area that we're not able to get to.
And Carmen Best no longer works for the Seattle Police Department after all of this, because after the city council decided to cut the police department's budget and her salary, she decided to retire. Additionally, Mayor Durkin wants everybody to think that people are moving to Seattle in droves and nobody's leaving.
People are not leaving Seattle. In fact, again, our housing prices continue to increase, and the people moving here are young families.
This is an article from Como. This was written Thursday, July 23rd, 2020, so not too long ago. Scroll down and it says more and more people are seeking to sell their homes and move out of Seattle area, according to a newly released report. The report by Seattle-based online residential real estate company Redfin found that the number of home sellers looking to leave Seattle metro area has jumped to 13.7% compared with 11.2% at the same time last year. It also says, meanwhile, the net outflow of homeowners from Seattle has soared from 363 in the second quarter of last year to 6,007 in the second quarter of this year, a jump of more than 1,500%. So we go back to Rachel Maddow to wrap up how she's holding the powerful accountable.
Again, we don't intend to interject throughout the evening, but when something really, really wrong gets said deliberately, particularly when they're trying to build a theme around it, we feel responsible to correct the record.
Okie dokie. So, moving on to Sean Hannity.
First, we turn to breaking news out of Seattle tonight, where anarchy now reigns supreme.
Okay, reality check on that one. Anarchy did not reign supreme in the city of Seattle during the CHAZCHOP. The CHAZCHOP was multiple blocks of one neighborhood, and the average Seattle resident was probably completely unaffected by what was going on there. Now, that's not to say that it didn't have serious consequences for the people who lived and worked there. We've seen that people who had businesses in that area are suing the city of Seattle over it, that a father of one of the people who was killed there is suing the city over this situation. And you could absolutely make the case that this sets a dangerous precedent for mob takeovers of a city, but you can't say that that's exactly what happened in this particular case, because it just is not true.
The mayor of Seattle, Jenny Durkin is her name, is either too stupid or too incompetent to care. She's actually letting the anarchists take over, control, and even destroy her city. In fact, she's calling this autonomous zone patriotic.
Again, anarchists did not take over and destroy Seattle. Like I said, this was relegated to one particular part of the city. Now, that's not to minimize, again, what happened there and the precedent that it could set for how police departments and cities manage essentially insurrections in their boundaries. This is just to say that to call it a total citywide takeover by anarchists that completely nuked the town is definitely an exaggeration. Just like Mayor Durkin and Rachel Maddow were totally minimizing what happened in Seattle, Sean Hannity is maximizing it for the effect it has with his audience. To take your attention back to that Como article about people selling their homes and leaving Seattle, their reasons that they cite ring a lot more true to my experience, having also decided to leave Seattle, than an anarchist takeover of the entire city. And that is, frankly, that it's too expensive to live in Seattle for all of the headache that the city brings. The first thing that they cite is low mortgage rates and changes in what people want in a home are providing incentive to people who were already considering a move. That more Seattle area employers are offering flexible remote work policies, which frees workers from having to live there. A significant percentage of people are looking to move from Seattle to a more affordable market or closer to family. And the coronavirus pandemic is preventing Seattle area residents from fully enjoying local amenities, which lowers the incentive to live there. And that's probably true in in a lot of cities across the country that people and the way of life that they're used to in a city, like going out to dinner and doing the things that make cities fun, are no longer available. So it's just a headache dealing with things that you dealt with for the amenities of living in a city, which you can no longer enjoy. Our rent in 1 month literally went from $1,575 to $2,300. And we decided to quit Seattle at that point for the city north of it, but eventually we quit the city altogether and decided to move out to the country so that we could have a different lifestyle altogether. And that has been the right move for us, and didn't even know that the coronavirus was coming when we made that move, but our lives have not changed a whole lot at all, frankly. I can go out to my gym, which is my horse pasture, and walk around without a mask on. I can go to my grocery store, which is meeting a farmer on the side of the road, without having to worry about social distancing at a grocery store where tons of people are crowded together and wearing masks. Basically, life has gone on pretty similarly to the way it was, and that's because we don't live in a crowded place. But we did not leave Seattle because we were wearing flak jackets on a regular basis because anarchists were staged at every corner ready to shoot us. And so I use these two examples to just alert you to the use of this maximization, minimization, rhetorical tool when you're watching the news so that you can catch yourself and not be a bot. And consume news responsibly so that when you go on social media and you post a rant about whatever it is that you feel so passionately about, that whatever comes out of your mouth will actually make sense. It will not just be spin that you are regurgitating from whatever your favorite pundit is saying. And frankly, the reason that I did this video is because it doesn't end at social media. There are real world consequences to people having these black and white views of reality and frankly, disingenuous views of their enemy. And it's really important to understand that what you may think about somebody who is different than you may actually be totally false based on whatever spin it is you're being fed in whatever media you're consuming. And this is something I see among journalists, not just the general public, because I'm friends with a lot of journalists and I see their private posts on social media, and they are also consuming a lot of this completely uncritically, and it's forming the way that they see issues that they are then reporting on, which makes me very concerned because it's not just ending in social media, it actually has real world consequences. So please practice responsible news consumption and wear protection like your brain. Do not fall prey to maximizing and minimizing punditry. And remember that when you see those kinds of tactics, it's best to say, is reality really that simple? Or is it possible there's nuance to the situation that they're not telling me and I need to be responsible and go seek out for myself? Again, I'm Allison Morrow. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe, hit that bell icon for notifications when I upload new videos. You can support me at patreon.com at patreon.com/Allison Morrow. Leave me a comment with some feedback and I will see you next time.